Here we go. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Riggs, as you all know, because we're faculty here. Real quick, I want to talk to you on some unethical behaviors of educators and what you need to know as an educator yourself. During this project, what we did was we did 3 literature reviews, combined our information together, and created this PowerPoint. The 3 topics that we covered in this were inappropriate sexual behavior or relationships with students, social networking between teachers and students, and then cheating on state assessments. These were done, and we also, at the end of this, will give recommendations, or during it, throughout it, give recommendations on how to abide by these things and avoid some of these problems. Inappropriate sexual behavior. What do you need to know? Well, first we need to figure out exactly what that is, okay? And through our research, we found that it could be any sexual innuendos that are made, obviously inappropriate touching, inappropriate text messaging, email, or social media contact with a student, and soliciting sex, obviously from a student, is bad, and then the obvious sex with a student, that is a big no-no. But all those are considered inappropriate. Responsibility for awareness falls strictly on the school district. It is their job to understand what's going on and know about the situations and handle those situations. A lot of problems today lie in the fact that administration are passing the trash. So in other words, they're not necessarily covering it up, but they're signing non-disclosure agreements, and that way that educators can continue to do what they're doing, and possibly that involves teaching and possibly the inappropriate advances towards students. This allows the teachers to continue to teach in other districts as long as they agree to that non-disclosure, instead of the school districts actually following laws and prosecuting that to the full extent. Inappropriate sexual behavior, something else. Title IX came out, I guess, in 1972, and it prohibits the sexual harassment of students, female students, in any federally funded programs, which would be any public schools. A study conducted by the Georgia Law Review, one of the main things that I found was that 81% of students in grades 8 through 11 have experienced some sort of sexual harassment during their time in education. So how do we decrease the inappropriate sexual behaviors that teachers have with students? Well, there's a number of ways. Okay, there's a few recommendations that we suggest as a group. School districts should hire employees responsible strictly for Title IX compliance. They should also publish and hand out anti-harassment policies and grievance procedures so that people know if they have been affected by that. Students, teachers, if they've been affected by those things, the procedures for going about making those claims. All school staff, and that's anybody that comes in contact with students, should be trained in Title IX compliance. Also, compliance of inappropriate behavior should be investigated completely and dealt with appropriately to the full extent of the law. So not only should it be dealt with and covered up, it shouldn't be done that way. It should be handled and done the right way, and not just passed along to the next school to handle with whoever hires that person. And school districts should consult and counsel from start to finish. So make sure that they get help, whether that be lawyers, law enforcement officers, but that they handle it the right way so that they are make sure that their rear ends are covered. All right, the next topic we talk about is social network interaction amongst teachers and students, or between those two, and what you need to know. Social networking sites such as Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, any of those, okay, are very common among teens and adults. 95% of teens are online, and 81% of them are using social networking sites. Schools use social networking as a great way to communicate, and it is a great way to communicate as long as it's done appropriately. However, it can obviously, as this topic we'll discuss, can be used in a negative way as well. Parents and teachers are on both sides of the fence of this. Some of them like using social networking, some of them don't, as a means of communications between parents and teachers, and students and teachers, and schools, and so forth. The risk between students and teachers. Statements made by educators could be taken to reflect badly on their professional judgment. So a lot of times people have a difficult time keeping the two separate, personal and professional. And it's very hard to do that online. Social networking sites could reveal that teachers are doing some things illegal or reckless. Obviously, there's no control over what other people post, so they can document you doing things that you shouldn't be doing. And teachers can give unwarranted, a lot of times, attention to students by commenting on certain things or posting pictures or articles or things that they've done, and so it can be used in a negative way as well. Teachers engage in behaviors that go against the community norms or present an undesirable example to children and adolescents. So as an educator, you really can't turn off the fact that you're a teacher. Okay, you're that 24/7, even in your online presence and footprint. You need to make sure that those things display the appropriate behavior. Although there are risks to social networking, it also creates many advantages. Some advantages include high engagement. Obviously, high active student learning. They enjoy doing those things, so therefore they're more apt to participate in the lessons. It can create a sense of belonging. It obviously gives each student a voice, and that they have their own accounts that can do that, and then students can develop communication, collaboration, and peer learning skills that they might not otherwise learn. What teachers and schools can do to protect themselves. Schools should have a clear policy on social networking and texting between teachers and students. As long as the rules are laid out beforehand, a lot of times teachers can abide by those, and so can students. Students must be taught the difference between communicating professionally and personally. Obviously, there's a difference. The adult should know that. We have to teach that to the student, but sometimes that is not always the case. I would make sure that everyone is well educated in that. Teachers should separate personal social networking sites and professional sites used only for communication about assignments and classwork. So, be careful about using your Facebook for school and your personal. Maybe you use Edmodo for all your school stuff, or you have separate Gmail accounts for that, so that everything is separate. Texting should fall within reasonable time boundaries, such as office hours. So if you do have the texting available there to you, make sure that it's appropriate and used during the right hours. You don't want to be texting a student late at night. Even if it is for the right reasons, it could be deemed inappropriate by their parents. And then make sure that you're continuously seeking professional development on these topics in regards to social networking and how to interact with students. Last thing. Educator cheating on state assessment and what you need to know. It's a bad idea, and it is what it is, that we judge teachers solely on standardized test scores. But it's called Teachers in a Dilemma. A lot of them are forced to teach the test or pull old tests maybe illegally, or seek out information and use that, or even change scores. Standardized testing is used as a primary means to evaluate school effectiveness. And then government funding depends on scores from these tests. As we mentioned, it's not good that that's the way it is, but there's nothing we can do about it right now. This creates obviously a lot of pressure on the teachers to teach that content, since a lot of their pay and their school funding is based upon that. In a published study, in a published study, 35% of teachers were aware or had participated in testing irregularities. That could be anything from teaching the test, actually seeking a copy of the test, knowing that somebody has a copy of the test, and such those things. And in Atlanta, several years ago, 29 total employees were convicted for falsified results on standardized tests. They just straight out lied about the scores that they had. When test scores become the goal of the teaching process, they both lose their values as indicators of educational status and distort the educational process in undesired ways. When you only have one way to assess, that's never good. Okay, we need to, just like each student is taught different, okay, and we have to reach them in their own separate ways, we need to make sure that we're assessing them those ways as well. Suggestions. Schools should incorporate a more authentic approach to evaluate teachers instead of just those test scores. And then teacher evaluation, standardized test scores, and other approaches to assessment should be combined as a tool to determine effectiveness. So instead of just having one way, let's have multiple ways to assess teachers. Questions? Yes, sir, Coach Lawler.
Where can we find more information on the Title IX?
Title IX can be a touchy subject, and you got to make sure that you do have all your information readily available. We can get with our Title IX coordinator at the school or in the system, and we'll get you some more information on that later. So, any other questions? All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to have you all this afternoon. We'll get a round of applause.